Well, let's talk about that first, because I've seen a lot of people calling this the best show of all time, and I mean, obviously you have some recency bias there, and in my head, like I was trying to think, and I mean that Great American Bash '89 is one I thought of, WrestleMania X7, and then two shows I attended live, the first Double or Nothing, and actually Takeover Dallas. Now, all very different shows. But this one, I think there was more to this one. And I think that this one maybe didn't have the match quality of some of those shows, although I'm not saying the match quality was bad at all, but just the overall package with the surprises, with the crowd atmosphere, with the way it was laid out, with really hardly any weak spots on the shows. It's definitely in the discussion. Ryan?
I mean, it's definitely the best pay-per-view AEW has put on from top to bottom when you include presentation and all the surprises and just coming out of the show feeling good. As far as best pay-per-view of all time, I mean, it's in the discussion with Great American Bash '89, with WrestleMania 17, Money in the Bank 2011 has to be up kind of discussion as too. So, I mean, yeah, really great show. And to me, this one more so out of all of those shows, this one kind of felt like coming in that it was going to be more of a like historical landmark show. And I kind of compared it to, like, I'm a big Marvel Cinematic Universe fan. It was almost like phase one of AEW started with All In, even though it wasn't an AEW show. But like this kind of felt like the end of phase one with all these. Now you have all these new big time roster additions, and now they're going into what I would call a phase two of their future. So this kind of felt like more of a historical show than honestly anything we've seen in a long time.
Interesting. Jeff, what do you think?
I think the one thing it has going against it is that its lull was all at once. In terms of, like, after that first 90, after that tag match, the oxygen was kind of sucked out of the room until Punk, even though the matches were quite good in between. And the Battle Royal we'll talk about a little bit. But yeah, I don't want to I don't want to crown it just yet, because it's AEW's best pay-per-view, I'd say that. What about the original All In compared to that?
That was really good too. I mean, and it was a landmark show for sure. It's just like, I think that there was some stuff in that, like I personally kind of rubbed me the wrong way, and especially in rewatch. Like you rewatch that Joey Ryan segment, and it's kind of hard to.
I don't remember all of All In on hand, Paul. It's one of those things where I was like, well, I just remember that show coming out and going, man, I feel really good about wrestling and what it could be. But the original Double or Nothing, I'd put it on par with that at least, if not better.
That's why, like, and again, I didn't watch it on pay-per-view, and I don't think I ever even went back and watched it, back, which I probably should have. But I know for me, being there live, I mean, it felt very special, and again, like really hardly any down spots in that show, and that to me was the strength of that one. Whereas this one had the surprises, really, really good matches. I mean, nothing. I don't think there's anything on here that you would call an all-time classic. I mean, we'll get into it, but I mean, some very, very good matches that, would be in, one or two of them will be in the match of the year discussion maybe. But, yeah, so I mean, and it's funny that Ryan brought up the Money in the Bank 2011, because two of the people that were big parts of that show were big parts of this show, in CM Punk, obviously, and the former Daniel Bryan, and the now rechristened Bryan Danielson, who, if you don't know, I mean, I gotta assume anybody listening to this has watched the show, but if you didn't somehow, spoiler alert, Bryan Danielson showed up at the end of the show. If you shut the show off, after Kenny Omega pinned Christian, you missed a few things. I don't think anybody did, but I mean, we got Bryan Danielson, which I think everybody was expecting. We got Adam Cole, baby. We got Minoru Suzuki, who I think some people maybe were hoping for, but probably weren't expecting. Ruby Soho, who I think everybody was expecting. Can't remember if I don't think there's any other surprises. Oh, well, I guess, Jorge Masvidal and Andrei Arlovsky and all that. And I don't know whatever happened with that. We'll get into that later, but they promised to do something later in the show, but never happened. But I don't think anybody really cared by the end of it. Yeah, I mean, Jeff, were you expecting Cole? I mean, I think everybody's expecting Brian. I saw a little bit of rumblings about Cole, but I don't know if I was expecting it.
No, I wasn't. I thought they were going to hold off on that until New York. And I don't know what they're going to do for New York now, because it seemed like you had two big surprises in your holster, and I had heard about the Bryan Danielson coming in here. So I think everybody was kind of expecting that. I think that's also why they were, as Ryan noted to me on Twitter, that's probably why they were sitting on their hands a little bit for the Christian match. Cole, I thought for sure if he's coming in New York and not here. So, but it was a nice surprise, and then they topped the surprise. I don't know if they out surprised people, maybe just a little bit. You kind of want to string those big things along a little bit, but hey, they only do 4 pay-per-views a year, which is a positive for this company so far. I don't want them to go to 12, and have to rush booking and stuff. They can take their time with it. So, I was good with them appearing on the both appearing on the pay-per-view.
What would you think? Maybe I'll get to you in a second, Ryan. But what would you, maybe for the New York show? I had in my mind kind of a double main event tag team match. So you get Daniel Bryan's first match in AEW, Bryan and I don't know, maybe Christian or Jungle Boy against Omega and Adam Cole. And then in the other main event, Moxley and Kingston against Minoru Suzuki and Lance Archer. I think that would be a pretty good card, and whatever else.
Yeah, assuming that Suzuki's going to do more than one AEW card.
Yeah, and I think him teaming with Archer makes sense, just because I think they're teaming on an indie show right around that time, if I'm not mistaken. Plus,
I could see Punk asking for a Suzuki match.
Oh yeah, or even Bryan and Punk against Cole and Omega would work too. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the returns that we got, the surprises?
I mean, I obviously wasn't surprised about Bryan Danielson. That was expected. Ruby Soho was expected. I almost was kind of was surprised at the beginning when they opened with Miro. I was kept looking back at the tunnel to maybe see if his wife would show up because I mean it has to feel like I don't know if she'll ever be like a regular, but she's going to make an appearance at some point. I mean, as much as he references her. But Adam Cole, I mean, we kind of heard the rumblings, yesterday and more today that, he was going to show up. I don't think it's unexpected, but as far as putting it all on this show, I think that was honestly the right move, because there's just something about this show that felt like as the week went by that it was clearly going to do a huge number on pay-per-view, and a lot of lapsed fans who haven't watched maybe since Punk left WWE were ordering the show and I mean, you just kind of just threw everything at them to try to hook them. I mean, if you have all these surprises lined up and you're in front of the biggest pay-per-view audience you're going to have to date, just get something to hook them, to make them watch, on Wednesday and on Friday and in New York and in November and all that. So I think putting, I guess, all your eggs in the basket at the same time was the right move tonight. So I like that. For Suzuki, I really only think we're going to get Suzuki for the Moxley match in Cincinnati. I feel like that's the match he wanted for his homecoming. So I think that's just going to be a one-off there, because Suzuki's going to be doing the New Japan stuff and a few indie shows. I don't know if we'll get more than one appearance for him in AEW this time around, just because there's just so much going on in AEW. So they don't really, I would say, I don't think they need him more so than, for the Moxley match. But yeah, I think everything, all the debuts connected on all cylinders to me.
I want to bounce something off of what he just said, because I think there's also something else involved with this. Not only just packing everything on the pay-per-view for lapsed fans and things like that, which was great, but I think what they've really done here in AEW, which is fantastic, is it's not we're booking this show so you guys tune in to see what happens next on Dynamite necessarily in terms of the story. They wrap everything kind of up here, and then you still kind of want to watch Dynamite to see what the next chapter is, as opposed to in wrestling right now, it's always kind of like in WWE, it's booked to Raw. It's like here's the pay-per-view, and hey, let's see what the fallout is on Raw on Monday. Whereas here, it's kind of like everything's tied up into a bow, but we're going on to the next chapter in Dynamite. I thought that was really spectacular tonight.
That's brilliant. I made the point in our Facebook discussion thread that, you could make like a pretty great card for a Dynamite of people that weren't even on this show. And and they've already got a lineup, and nothing's a rematch, and hardly anything. I guess Moxley and Suzuki obviously is playing off stuff that happened on the pay-per-view, but you're going to have Ruby Soho debut. You had all kinds of talent that they feature all the time that weren't even on the show. So, you're looking forward to Dynamite. You definitely want to see, like you said, we wrapped up the Christian storyline. We wrapped up the Young Bucks storyline, all these programs are done. We got satisfying conclusions, MJF and Jericho, and now, okay, what's next? And so it's paying off what happened so that you get the payoff at the pay-per-view. You got all these surprises that you didn't really pay for. Although I think AEW is really good at hinting at things and kind of backhandedly promising things, but not outright promoting them and then delivering on what fans are expecting. And I think that's why they keep increasing their business. And, you talk about, Ryan brought up the pay-per-view business. Like, I think I said on a show not that long ago, I predicted 250,000 buys for this. And at the time, that was more than what a lot of people are saying. And now it almost feels like it's low. I think their previous record is somewhere in like 160 to 180 range for the last show. And I don't know, like, what do you guys think it's going to do? Ryan, you're kind of into the numbers.
I think it definitely broke 200. I don't know what really the ceiling is, because we don't know how many old fans that, Punk attracted to ordering this. If you look at Twitter, there's a lot of people who really haven't watched since he left who ordered the show. So I really don't, it's really hard to say because we don't know what that ceiling that he brought is. So but it definitely felt like it smashed anything they did in the past. And probably, I saw Dave was doing his predict over under 200,000 buys, and I was just like, it's going to go way over that, but how far? It's really too early to even kind of project.
Yeah. Jeff, what do you think, Jeff?
I think Punk was enough to get at least a fifth more. So I'm gonna say it's around 300.
Yeah,
I'll go with that.
That's kind of how it's feeling to me. And whatever it is, they may even go higher next time because they delivered, and that's the key. I just got this total sidetrack, but I got this dude that is always emailing me, and I know he's not a subscriber, but he's a total pro WWE guy. All he ever asks me about is questions about WWE, and the email he just sent me is asking about AEW and do they have a chance of being the top company now? And again, with all these signings and everything. So, to me, like, the fact that this guy, and then Dan LeCue, who I know will be listening, he's a total WWE guy. And he gave this show a 9 out of 10, which is the highest score he's ever given a pay-per-view, he said. So, this show was a grand slam home run, as far as I'm concerned. It wasn't perfect, but I at the same token, I'm not sure it could have been better.
Punk has brought in a certain generation of fan, and I got the same kind of email. They go, Hawkins, you still follow wrestling? I have a lot of friends from like my college and high school who go, I don't understand your damn Twitter, but what's up with the CM Punk thing? So it's a certain generation. It's probably, I'd say, people in their mid 30s who kind of lapsed, about 7 or 8 years ago when Punk left. Coming back in, I think there's a lot of those types of people. There's a few older types who follow it, and then they like to, when it gets exciting again, when you start to get like media hits and like Forbes and stuff, they're like, hey, what's this thing? What's going on with that? What's the deal with that? Because I hated watching WWE for this long, but I didn't want to come back to wrestling if it was hokey or stupid or whatever. And so you have a lot of that curiosity. You have a lot of that lapsed fan interest. We'll just see how it translates into buys and into eyeballs on Wednesday.
When I was looking at the trends year to year of Raw a little while ago for a column I did at Fight Game Media, I noticed that there was one of the biggest drop-offs year to year was 2013 to 2014. And I always attributed it to the fact that the network started in 2014 and people were kind of getting an overkill on wrestling because you'd watch the network and you could watch all that great old stuff and then the new stuff wasn't that great. So people were kind of getting away from watching Raw, but it never even occurred to me until Punk came back that that's also when Punk left. And I think when he left, a lot of fans gave up because it was like, this is a guy that we wanted on the top and WWE's refusing to push him. So we're done. And now they're back and obviously AEW is pushing them.